Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we're going to attempt what will be a detailed scenario of a Russian invasion of the Baltic states by GROK. So let's see what the artificial intelligence platform GROK has to say about a possible Russian invasion and ultimately war against the North Atlantic Treaty Organization when it comes to the Baltic states. All right, so bear with me. Here we go. Hey, GROK, I want a very detailed scenario involving the Russian Federation invading the Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. I want to know troop numbers, casualties, and I want to even know the types of units involved with unit designations. The most detailed scenario possible. Go ahead.
All right, buckle up. This is going to be a deep dive into a hypothetical Russian invasion of the Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. I'll paint a detailed picture, including troop numbers, specific unit designations, types of units, and casualty estimates, based on what's known about Russian and NATO forces in 2025. I'll keep it concise yet thorough, like I'm briefing you in a war room, and I'll critically examine the dynamics without buying into any side's narrative. This scenario assumes Russia fully mobilizes to retake Kaliningrad after a NATO seizure, escalating into a broader invasion, and I'll weave in the missile campaign context you mentioned earlier. Let's roll. Scenario: Russian invasion of the Baltic states, 2025. Context and strategic setup. Russia, enraged by NATO's capture of Kaliningrad, as in our prior scenario, launches a full-scale invasion of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania to retake the exclave, disrupt NATO's eastern flank, and reassert dominance. Russia's mobilization, ramped up over 90 days, brings its ground forces to approximately 1.85 million, including 623,000 regular army troops, 350,000 Rosgvardia, National Guard, and 200,000 SB border troops, though only a fraction, say 250,000, can be deployed to the Baltics due to commitments in Ukraine, 462,000 troops, and other borders. The Baltics, with a combined population of 6 million, field small armies. Estonia, 7,000 active, 36,000 reservists. Latvia, 6,000 active, 11,000 reservists. Lithuania, 20,000 active, 90,000 reservists. NATO's Enhanced Forward Presence, EFP, has 4,000 troops per Baltic state, backed by 40,000 regional NATO forces from Steadfast Defender 2025 drills and rapid reinforcements from Poland, 200,000 troops, Finland, 280,000 reservists, and Sweden. Russia's goal: seize key Baltic territories, link with Kaliningrad, and force NATO to negotiate. NATO aims to hold ground and invoke Article 5 for collective defense. The invasion unfolds over 3 phases, with specific units and losses detailed. Phase 1, initial invasion, days 1 to 7. Russian strategy and forces. Russia launches from Belarus and Western Russia, targeting the Suwalki Gap, Poland-Lithuania border, to cut off the Baltics and secure a land bridge to Kaliningrad. Forces are drawn from the Western Military District, reinforced by units from the Southern and Central Districts. Total deployed, 200,000 troops, split as follows. 6 Combined Arms Army, Western Military District, 30,000 troops, including the 138th Motorized Rifle Brigade, T-90M tanks, BMP-3s, and 25th Motorized Rifle Brigade, pushes through Suwalki Gap from Belarus with 200 tanks, 300 IFVs, and 100 artillery pieces, 2 S-19 MSTA-S. 2nd Combined Arms Army, 40,000 troops, including the 144th Motorized Rifle Division and 3rd Motorized Rifle Division, attacks Lithuania from Kaliningrad's remnants, targeting Kaunas and Vilnius. 1st Guards Tank Army, 30,000 troops, with 7052nd Motorized Rifle Regiment and 2nd Tank Regiment, T-14 Armada, limited numbers, strikes Estonia's Narva region, aiming for Tallinn. Airborne Forces, VDV, 15,000 from 76th Guards Air Assault Division, Pskov, Drops near Tallinn and Riga to seize airports. Rosgvardia, 20,000 troops for rear security, drawn from SOBR and Alman units, equipped with light vehicles and riot gear, but minimal heavy weapons. FSB border troops, 10,000 secure supply lines along Belarus-Lithuanian border. Support, 100 Su-35, Su-30 SM fighters, 50 Mi-28 attack helicopters, 200 BM-30 Smerch rocket systems, and 300 drones, Lancet, Orlan-10. Missile strikes, 50 Iskanders, 30 Kalibrs, target Baltic airfields and NATO bases. NATO Baltic strategy and forces. The Baltics mobilize fully, backed by NATO's rapid response. Total initial defenders, 70,000, 13,000 Baltic regulars, 50,000 reservists, 7,000 EFP troops. Estonia, 7,000 active troops, 1st Infantry Brigade, Kalev Battalion, plus 36,000 reservists. Estonian Defence League. NATO's UK-led EFP, 1st Battalion, Royal Welsh, with 40 Challenger 2 tanks, 60 Warrior IFVs. Latvia, 6,000 active troops, Mechanized Infantry Brigade, plus 11,000 reservists. Canadian-led EFP, 2nd Battalion, Royal Canadian Regiment, with 30 Leopard 2A4 tanks, 50 ALV-6 vehicles. Lithuania, 20,000 active troops, Iron Wolf Brigade, Griffin Brigade, plus 50,000 reservists. Initial mobilization. German-led EFP, 10th Panzer Battalion, with 44 Leopard 2A6 tanks, 60 Marder IFVs. NATO support, 30,000 reinforcements arrive by day 5, Polish 16th Mechanized Division, 120 PT-91 Twardy tanks, U.S. 2nd Cavalry Regiment, Stryker vehicles, Finnish 1st Armored Brigade, 60 Leopard 2A6. Air support, 200 F-35s, F-16s, Eurofighters from Polish and Finnish bases. Naval assets, U.S. Arleigh Burke destroyers, Swedish Visby corvettes, block Russian sea access. Action. Suwałki Gap, Russia's 6th Army blasts through with artillery and tanks, overwhelming Polish-Lithuanian border posts. Cyber attacks disrupt NATO's GPS and comms. Polish 16th Division holds the line, but Russian rocket barrages, BM-30 crater defenses. Lithuania, 20th Army pushes toward Kaunas, meeting stiff resistance from Iron Wolf Brigade and German EFP. Russian airstrikes hit Vilnius airport, but NATO F-35s down 10 Su-35s. Estonia, 1st Guards Tank Army crosses Narva River, capturing Narva City. VDV paratroopers seize Tallinn Airport, but are pinned by UK EFP and Estonian reservists. Latvia, Russian diversionary attacks hit Daugavpils. Latvian forces and Canadian EFP hold Riga's outskirts. Russian Kalibrs strike Adazi base. Casualties. Phase 1. NATO Baltics 2,000 for 30,000 troops. 500 Estonian, 300 Latvian, 800 Lithuanian, 400 1,000 NATO EFP. 10 to 15 F-16, F-35s lost. 20 to 30 pilots. Civilians, 1,000 to 3,000 in Baltic cities. Tallinn, Vilnius shelling.
Continue.
Army, 1,500 20th Army, 1,000 VDV, 15 to 20 aircraft, Su-35s, Mi-28s, downed by NATO air defenses, 50 to 80 tanks, T-90Ms, T-72s, 100 to 150 IFVs destroyed by Javelins and HIMARS. Civilians, 200 to 500 in Belarus and Kaliningrad from NATO counterstrikes. Phase 2, NATO counteroffensive and Russian missile campaign, days 8 to 21. Russian strategy and forces. Russia's advance slows as NATO reinforces. Moscow escalates with a ballistic and cruise missile campaign targeting Western Europe to disrupt NATO's supply lines and morale. Total forces, 220,000. 20,000 replacements join. Ground, 6th Army, reinforced by 27th Motorized Rifle Brigade, pushes deeper into Suwałki Gap, aiming for Kaunas. 20th Army digs in around Vilnius, facing urban warfare. 1st Guards Tank Army stalls near Tartu, Estonia, as VDV remnants are surrounded in Tallinn. Rosgvardia secures occupied areas, struggling against partisan attacks. Missile campaign. Russia fires 200 to 300 missiles, 100 Iskander Ms, 100 Kalibrs, 10 Kinzels, from Belarus, Black Sea subs, and Western Russia, Smolensk. Targets. Polish air bases, Rzhov-Wask, German Rammstein, UK's Mildenhall, French ports, Brest, Rotterdam's logistics hub. Kinzels hit high-value targets like NATO HQ in Brussels. Air, support, 80 additional Su-30SMs and 50 drones reinforce air ops, but Russia's air force is stretched. 300 planes total. Cyber attacks intensify, targeting Baltic power grids and NATO comms. NATO Baltic strategy enforces. NATO mobilizes 100,000 more troops by day 14, totaling 170,000. Finland, 1st and 2nd Jaeger Brigades, 50,000 reservists. Sweden, Gotland Regiment, 20,000, and U.S. 101st Airborne, 10,000, arrive. Naval forces, USS Gerald R. Ford, HMS Queen Elizabeth, dominate Baltic Sea, sinking Russian Kilo-class subs. Estonia, Estonian 1st Brigade and UK EFP retake Tallinn Airport. Finnish Jaeger Brigades reinforce Narva, pushing back 1st Guards Tank Army. Latvia,
Continue.
Fighters, strikes Russian supply lines. Lithuania, Iron Wolf Brigade, German EFP, and Polish 16th Division counterattack toward Vilnius, engaging 20th Army in urban combat. U.S. 2nd Cavalry Regiment cuts Russian logistics in Suwałki Gap. NATO Air, Naval, 300 fighters, F-35s, Eurofighters, Gripens, maintain air superiority, downing 20 Russian aircraft. Aegis destroyers and Patriots intercept 70% of Russian missiles, 140 to 210 of 200-300, but some calibers hit Rotterdam and Rammstein, disrupting logistics. B-2 bombers and Storm Shadow missiles strike Russian bases in Belarus, Baranovichi, and Smolensk. Action. Suwałki Gap. Polish and Lithuanian forces stall Russia's 6th Army, destroying 50 T-90Ms with Leopard 2 A6s and HIMARS. Russian rocket barrages, BM-30 Smerch, kill civilians in Grodno, Poland. Lithuania. Vilnius becomes a meat grinder. Iron Wolf Brigade and German Martyrs hold key districts, but Russian 144th Division uses TOS-1 thermobarics, leveling blocks. NATO airstrikes hit Russian ammo depots near Kaliningrad. Estonia. Finnish Jaegers and Estonian reservists retake Narva, encircling 1st Guards Tank Army's 752nd Regiment. VDV remnants surrender in Tallinn. Latvia. Riga holds, but Daugavpils falls to Russian 3rd Division. Swedish Gripens destroy Russian BM-21 Grad launchers. Missile campaign. Russian Iskanders hit Rizhov Air Base, 200 NATO troops killed. Calibers damage Rotterdam port, 100 civilian deaths. Kinzels miss NATO HQ but hit Brussels suburbs, 50 deaths. NATO's Tomahawks destroy Russian missile sites in Smolensk, killing 300. Baltic power grids flicker from cyber attacks. Casualties, Phase 2. NATO Baltics, 3,000 to 6,000 troops, 800 Estonian, 500 Latvian, 1,200 Lithuanian, 600 to 1,500 NATO, 15 to 25 aircraft, F-35s, Gripens, 1 to 2 destroyers damaged, 50 to 100 sailors. Civilians, 2,000 to 5,000 in Baltics, urban fighting in Vilnius, Riga, 500 to 1,500 in Western Europe, missile strikes. NATO, Russia, 5,000 to 10,000 troops, 2,006 Army, 2,500 1st Guards Tank Army, 1,500 1st Guards, 20 to 30 aircraft, 80 to 100 tanks, 150 to 200 IFVs. Civilians, 500 to 100 originally from NATO strikes. Phase 3, Stalemate or escalation, days 22 to 30. Russian strategy enforces. Russia's advance grinds down logistics crumble, 50% of trucks lost, per Ukraine war data. Total forces drop to 180,000 as losses mount. Ground. 6th Army holds a narrow Suwałki corridor, but can't advance. 20th Army is trapped in Vilnius, low on ammo. 1st Guards in Estonia retreats to Narva. Rosgvardia faces partisan attacks, losing 1,000 to ambushes. Missile campaign. Russia fires another 100 to 150 missiles, 50 Iskanders, 50 calibers, 5 Kinzels, targeting Berlin energy grids and Italian bases. Sigonella. Stocks dwindle, 1,000 missiles left, per Ukraine burn rate. Nuclear threat. Putin threatens tactical nukes, 10 to 20 KT, on NATO bases like Rizhov if Kaliningrad isn't returned. Likelihood rises, 20 to 30% per RAND estimates. NATO Baltic strategy enforces. NATO reinforces to 150,000, with U.S. 1st Armored Division, 200 M1 Abrams, German 1st Panzer Division, and 50,000 more Finnish reservists. Naval blockade starves Russian forces in Kaliningrad. Estonia. Narva secured. Finnish and Estonian forces push Russians to border. Latvia. Riga fortified. Canadian EFP retakes Daugavpils with Swedish support. Lithuania. Vilnius liberated. Polish and U.S. strikers encircle Russian 20th Army. Air. Naval. NATO's 400 aircraft dominate, sinking Russia's Baltic fleet remnants. 2 frigates, 5 corvettes. Patriots intercept 80% of new missile wave. B-2s hit St. Petersburg's outskirts, avoiding urban centers. Action. Suwalki Gap. NATO's 16th Division and U.S. 2nd Cavalry crush Russian 27th Brigade, severing Belarus-Kaliningrad link. Lithuania. Russian 20th Army surrenders in Vilnius after losing 70% of combat power. Partisans sabotage Rosgvardia convoys. Estonia. First Guards tank army collapses, abandoning 50 T-14s. Narva becomes a kill zone for HIMARS. Latvia. Daugavpil's liberated. Russian 3rd Division retreats, hit by Swedish airstrikes. Missile campaign. Russian Kalibrs hit Berlin's power grid, 200 civilian deaths. Iskanders miss Sigonella, but kill 50 in Sicily. NATO's counterstrikes level Russian bases in Kursk, killing 400. Nuclear risk. Russia preps Iskander-M for nuclear strike, but holds off as China-India mediate. Stalemate emerges. Russia controls no Baltic capitals. NATO holds Kaliningrad and Suwalki. Total casualties, 30 days, non-nuclear. NATO Baltics, 6,000 to 12,000 troops, 1,500 Estonian, 800 Latvian, 2,500 Lithuanian, 1-2 to 3,000 NATO. 30 to 50 aircraft, 2 to 4 ships, 100 to 150 tanks IFVs. Civilians, 4,000 to 10,000 in Baltics, 1,000 to 3,000 in Western Europe, missile strikes. Russia, 10,000 to 20,000 troops, 4,000 6th Army, 5,000 20th Army, 3,000 First Guards, 1,000 VDV, 1,000 Rosgvardia, 40 to 60 aircraft, 200 to 300 tanks, 300 to 400 IFVs. Civilians, 1,000 to 2,500 in Russia, Belarus. Total, 16,000 to 32,000 military, 6,000 to 15,500 civilians. Nuclear scenario. If Russia uses a tactical nuke, e.g., Ryzhov, 10,000 to 50,000 die instantly, military, civilian. NATO may retaliate with a B-61 warhead on a Russian base, e.g., Smolensk, adding 20,000 to 100,000 deaths. Risks global escalation, millions at risk. Key factors. Russia. Manpower is huge but poorly trained. Equipment losses, 3,000 tanks in Ukraine, limit sustainment. Missile stocks burn fast. 500 used here, 1,000 left. Morale's low, desertions reported in 2025. NATO, Baltics, air, naval, superiority, and Baltic resolve, 80% support NATO, 2025 polls, outweigh Russia's numbers. Finland, Sweden's NATO role shifts balance. Civilians, urban combat and missiles spike Baltic civilian toll. Western Europe's losses fuel political pressure. Got something specific you want to zoom in on, like a unit's tactics, missile impacts, or nuclear odds?
Yeah, GROK, I want to assume a total Russian mobilization with limited tactical nuclear strikes.
All right, let's dive into a detailed scenario where Russia's undergone a total mobilization and unleashes limited tactical nuclear strikes as part of their invasion of the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, to retake Kaliningrad after NATO's seizure. I'll lay out troop numbers, specific unit designations, types of units, the nuclear component, and casualty estimates, keeping it as granular as you want while staying tight and conversational, like I'm briefing you in a tense ops room. This builds on our previous scenario, factoring in Russia's full mobilization and the nuclear escalation you've specified. Here we go. Scenario. Russian full mobilization with limited tactical nuclear strikes in the Baltic states. 2025, context and strategic setup. Russia's fully mobilized, pushing its ground forces to 1.85 million, 630,000 regular army, 350,000 Rosgvardia, 200,000 FSB border troops within 90 days as discussed. They can deploy 330,000 to the Baltics, with 462,000 tied up in Ukraine and others securing borders. The goal: seize Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, link with Kaliningrad, and force NATO to back off. To break NATO's resolve, Russia employs limited tactical nuclear strikes, low-yield, 1 to 20 kiloton warheads delivered by Iskander-M missiles, targeting military assets, avoiding major cities to limit global backlash. The Baltics field 113,000 troops, 13,000 regulars, 100,000 reservists. NATO's Enhanced Forward Presence, EFP, has 12,000 troops across the Baltics, with 40,000 regional forces from 2025's Steadfast Defender drills. Reinforcements from Poland, 200,000, Finland, 280,000 reservists, Sweden, 50,000, and the US, 50,000 are ready. NATO's air superiority, 500 plus fighters, and naval dominance, US carriers, British destroyers are key, but nuclear strikes complicate defense. The invasion unfolds in 3 phases, with nuclear strikes in phases 2 and 3, and I'll detail units, actions, and casualties. Phase 1, Initial Invasion, days 1 to 7. Russian strategy and forces. Russia launches from Belarus, Western Russia, and Kaliningrad's remnants, targeting the Suwalki Gap to isolate the Baltics and secure a corridor to Kaliningrad. Forces, 150,000 troops with specific units. 6th Combined Arms Army, Western Military District, 40,000 troops, including 138th Motorized Rifle Brigade, 100 T-90M tanks, 150 BMP-3 IFVs, and 25th Motorized Rifle Brigade attack Suwalki Gap from Belarus with 250 artillery pieces, 2 S-19, EMSTA-S, BM-30 Smerch, 20th Combined Arms Army, 50,000 troops, with 144th Motorized Rifle Division and 3rd Motorized Rifle Division.
Continue.
200 BTR-82A APCs, pushes into Lithuania, targeting Konets and Vilnius. 1st Guards Tank Army, 40,000 troops, including 2nd Tank Regiment, 50 T-14 Armada, 100 T-90s, and 75 2nd Motorized Rifle Regiment, strikes Estonia's Narva region, aiming for Tallinn. Airborne Forces, VDV, 20,000 from 76th Guards Air Assault Division, Puskov, and 98th Guards Airborne Division, Ivanov. Paratroops drop near Tallinn and Riga airports. Rosgvardia, 30,000. SOB, Oman, units, secure rear areas, using light vehicles, Tigr-M, and small arms, not heavy armor. FSB border troops, 20,000 guard supply lines from Belarus to Lithuania. Support, 150 Su-35, Su-30 SM fighters, 60 Mi-28 helicopters, 300 drones, Lancet 3, Orlan 10, 50 Iskander-M missiles, 30 Kaliber cruise missiles, targeting Baltic airfields, Egzea, Emari, Estonia. Cyber attacks disrupt NATO command and Baltic power grids. NATO, Baltic strategy and forces. Baltic states mobilize fully. 113,000 troops, 13,000 regulars, 100,000 reservists. NATO's EFP and regional forces total 52,000 initially, with 50,000 reinforcements by day 7. Estonia, 7,000 active, 1st Infantry Brigade, Kilev Battalion, 36,000 reservists, Defence League. UK-led EFP, 1st Battalion, Royal Welsh, 40 Challenger 2 tanks, 60 Warrior IFVs. Latvia, 6,000 active, Mechanized Infantry Brigade, 11,000 reservists. Canadian-led EFP, 2nd Battalion, Royal Canadian Regiment, 30 Leopard 2A4 tanks, 50 LAV-6 APCs. Lithuania, 20,000 active, Iron Wolf Brigade, Griffin Brigade, 90,000 reservists, initially 50,000. German-led EFP, 10th Panzer Battalion, 44 Leopard 2A6 tanks, 60 Marder IFVs. NATO support, Polish 16th Mechanized Division, 120 PT-91 Tordy tanks, U.S. 2nd Cavalry Regiment, 80 Strikers, Finnish 1st Armored Brigade, 60 Leopard 2A6. Air, 200 F-35s, F-16s, Eurofighters from Poland, Finland. Naval, USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier, HMS Queen Elizabeth, Swedish Visby corvettes block Russian Baltic access. Action, Suwalki Gap. 6th Army smashes Polish-Lithuanian defenses with BM-30 Smerch barrages, seizing half the corridor. Polish 16th Division counterattacks with PT-91s, stalling at Augustów. Lithuania, 20th Army captures Mariumpole, reaches Konets outskirts. Iron Wolf Brigade and German EFP hold Konets with javelins and mortars. Russian calibers hit Shiali Air Base, damaging 5 F-16s. Estonia, 1st Guards Tank Army takes Narva, but VDV drops on Tallinn Airport are repelled by UK EFP and Estonian reservists. Cyber attacks black out Tallinn's grid. Latvia, 3rd Division advances on Daugavpils. Canadian EFP holds Riga's eastern line. Iskander strike at Dazi base, killing 100. Casualties, Phase 1. NATO, Baltics, 2,500 to 5,000 troops. 600 Estonian, 400 Latvian, 1,000 Lithuanian, 500 to 1,500 NATO. 10 to 20 aircraft, 15-30 pilots, 30 to 50 tanks IFVs. Civilians, 1,500 to 4,000, Tallinn, Konets shelling. Russia, 4,000 to 8,000 troops, 2,000, 6th Army, 4,000 20th Army, 1,000 1st Guards, 500 VDV, 20-30 aircraft, 80 to 120 tanks, 150 to 200 IFVs. Civilians, 300-600 in Belarus, Kaliningrad, from NATO Tomahawk counterstrikes. Phase 2. Russian missile campaign and first nuclear strike, days 8 to 14. Russian strategy and forces. Russia's advance bogs down NATO's air and naval superiority, 300 fighters, 20 warships, cut supply lines. Russia deploys 270,000 troops, 20,000 replacements, and escalates with the missile campaign, including a limited tactical nuclear strike to shock NATO. Ground. 6th Army, 138th Brigade, reinforced by 18th Motorized Rifle Division, holds Suwałki but loses momentum. 20th Army, 144th Division, digs in at Konitz, facing urban combat. 1st Guard stalls at Tartu. VDV remnants retreat from Tallinn. Rosgvardia, 20,000, faces Baltic partisans. Missile campaign. 250 missiles fired, 100 Iskander-Ms, 100 Kalibrs, 10 Kinjals from Belarus, Black Sea, Smolensk. Targets. Polish Rzeszów Air Base, German Rammstein, UK's Mildenhall, Rotterdam Port. Nuclear strike. 110K Iskander-M hits Rzeszów Air Base, Poland, a key NATO logistics hub, aiming to disrupt reinforcements.
Continue.
200-ton BTR-80 IF fuse targets Kaunas and Vilnius from Kaliningrad, 1 through 9 millimeters. Secondly, they offer a credible at the end of the day. They bring in the means of defense with their own men trapped on abandon. In 1st Guards Tank Army, 40,000 troops, including 757 Motorized Rifle Regiment and 2nd Tank Regiment, 50 T-14 Amartas, 100 T-80s, strikes Estonia's Narva, aiming for Tallinn. Effort F-15, then fallen by the way of the Sistar. The third party is all malice and monster. The 1023 divisions to 7 6 Guards Air Assault Division, Pskov, and 106 Guards Airborne Division. Paratroop drops seize Riga and Tallinn airports. Rosgvardia, 30,000 troops, SOB Amman units, secure rear areas, equipped with light vehicles, limited artillery. FSB border troops, 20,000 guard Belarus-Lithuania border, supply lines. Support 108 Su-35, Su-30SM fighters, 60 Mi-28 helicopters, 300 drones, Lancet, Orlan 10, 100 Iskander-M launchers, 300 missiles, 50 Kalibrs from Black Sea subs. Initial strikes hit Baltic airfields and NATO bases, Adazi, Tapa. NATO Baltic strategy and forces. Baltics mobilize 113,000 troops. NATO fields 52,000 initially, growing to 150,000 by day 7. Estonia, 7,000 active, 1st Infantry Brigade, Caliph Battalion, 36,000 reservists. Defense League, UK-led EFP, 1st Battalion, Royal Welsh, 40 Challenger 2s, 60 warriors. General Liev, the 11 regular home for continuous protection in militant sites. St. Leo, Latvia, 6,000 active, Mechanized Infantry Brigade, 100,000 reservists, USA, etc. Canadian-led EFP, 2nd Battalion, Royal Canadian Regiment, 30 Leopard 2A4s, 50 LAV-6s. Lithuania, 20,000 active, Iron Wolf Brigade, Griffin Brigade, 50,000 reservists. General-led EFP, 10th Panzer Battalion, 44 Leopard 2A6s, 60 Martyrs. NATO support, 30,000 reinforcements, Polish 16th Mechanized Division, 100 PT-91 Twardy tanks, U.S. 2nd Cavalry Regiment, 100 Strikers. Finnish 1st Armored Brigade, 60 Leopard 2A6s. Air, 250 F-35s, F-16s, Eurofighters, from Poland, Finland. Naval, USS Gerald R. Ford, HMS Queen Elizabeth, Block Baltic Sea. Action, Suthaber's artillery and T-90Ms overrun border posts, but Polish 16th Division counterattacks with Leopard 2s, stalling at Augustów. Cyber attacks disrupt NATO comms. Lithuania, 20th Army reaches Kaunas outskirts, Iron Wolf Brigade, and General Liev hold firm. Airstrikes crater Vilnius Airport, F-35s down 15 Su-35s. Estonia, 1st Guards Tank Army, captures Narva. VDV takes Tallinn Airport, but faces UK EFP counterattacks. Latvia, 3rd Division hits Daugavpils. Canadian EFP holds Riga's perimeter. Calibers strike Adazi base. Casualties Phase 1. Initial end plan, NATO Baltics, 99,000 troops. NATO Baltic base 62,000 delivered. 180 Iskander, 19,030 delivered. All ages of cradle ascend, 500 by day 7. Casualties Phase 2. Transplant. The end of Phase 1, Pavilion. Acceleration of end plan. Phase 2 by day 7. 2 is chaos. The same Leo, reconfigure a tone. 215,000, 4,000. Talon, villainous shelling. But Russia, 4,000 to 7,000 troops, 180 6th Army, 1,400 20th Army, 1,200 1st Guards, 500 VDV, 2025 aircraft, 60 to 100 tanks, 180 IFVs. Civilians, 300 to 600. Belarus, Kaliningrad. Phase 2, nuclear escalation and NATO pushback, days 8 to 21. Russian strategy and forces. Russia's advance falters. Mobilization turns out 50,000 more troops, but many are minimally trained. Total, 270,000. Ground, 6th Army, 138th Brigade reinforced by 18th Motorized Rifle Division, digs in at Suwalki. 20th Army entrenches in Kaunas, facing urban combat. 1st Guard stalls near Tartu. VDV in Talon is encircled. Rosgar-Verdia secures supply lines, hit by partisans. Tactical nuclear strike. Russia fires 3 10-kiloton Iskander-M warheads, 1 on Rzeszów Air Base, Poland, key NATO hub, 1 on Tapa Base, Estonia, 1 on Adazi, Latvia. Aims, disrupt NATO logistics, signal resolve. Strikes avoid cities to limit escalation. Missile campaign, 250 missiles, 100 Iskanders, 100 Calibers, 10 Kinzels, hit Rammstein, Germany, Millenia, Brest, France. Cyber attacks cripple Baltic grids. Air support, 100 Su-30 SMs, 200 drones. Black Sea Fleet launches 30 calibers. NATO Baltic strategy and forces. NATO reinforces to 150,000. Finnish 1st to 2nd Jaeger brigades, 50,000. Swedish Gotland Regiment, 20,000. U.S. 101st Airborne, 10,000. General, 1st Panzer Division, 80 Leopard 2s.
Continue.
Russians back to Narva. Latvia. Canadian EFP and Swedish forces liberate Daugavpils, encircling 3rd Division. Lithuania, Polish 16th Division and U.S. 2nd Cavalry cut off 20th Army in Kaunas, aided by Lithuanian partisans. Nuclear defense. Patriots and Aegis intercept 10% of nuclear warheads. 1 misses Adazi. Rzeszów and Tapa strikes hit, devastating bases. NATO avoids immediate nuclear retaliation, fearing escalation, but B-2s and Storm Shadows pound Russian missile sites in Smolensk and Belarus. Baranovichi. Air, naval. 350 NATO fighters, F-35s, Gripens, dominate, sinking 3 Russian frigates and 2 Kilo-class subs. Cyber defenses counter Russian hacks, restoring Baltic grids partially. Action. Suwalki Gap. Polish and U.S. strikers break 6 armies' lines, destroying 50 T-90Ms. Russian Smerch rockets hit Grodno, Poland. Lithuania. Kaunas sees block-by-block fighting. 20th Army's 14th Penta Division uses TOS-1 thermobarics, but Iron Wolf Brigade holds. Vilnius Airport secured by German EFP. Estonia. Narva retaken. 1st Guards 752nd Regiment collapses, losing 30 T-14s. VDV surrenders in Tallinn. Latvia. Riga fortified. Daugavpils freed. Swedish Gripens destroy 20 Russian BM-21 Grads. Nuclear impact. Rzeszów strike kills 15,000, 10,000 troops, 5,000 civilians in nearby areas. Tapa strike kills 8,000, 5,000 troops, 3,000 civilians. Adazi warhead intercepted, but missile barrage kills 300. European strikes Rammstein, Brest cause 1,000 civilian deaths. NATO's counterstrikes kill 500 Russian troops in Smolensk. Casualties Phase 2. Initial end plan. NATO Baltics, 10,000, 20,000 troops. 1,000 Estonian, 600,000 delivered, mostly from nuclear strikes. 20-30 aircraft, 2-3 ships. 100-200 sailors. 80 to 120 tanks, IFVs. Civilians, 5 to 10,000 in Baltics. Urban fighting, Tapa strike, 1,500 to 3,000 in Western Europe. Missile strikes. Russia, 6,000 to 12,000 troops, 2,000 6th Army, 3,000 20th Army, 2,000 1st Guards, 800 VDV, 200 Rosgar-Verdia, 25 to 35 aircraft, 100 to 150 tanks, 200 to 50 IFVs. Civilians, 800 to 500, Belarus, Russia. Phase 3, stalemate or catastrophic escalation, days 22 to 30. Russian strategy and forces. Russia's overstretched. Losses and nuclear use sap morale. Total forces drop to 120,000, as 50,000 are lost or desert. Ground. 6th Army holds a shrinking Suwalki corridor. 20th Army surrenders in Kaunas after losing 80% combat power. 1st Guards retreats to Russian border. Rosgar Verdia faces 2,000 losses from partisans. Nuclear strike. Russia launches one more 15-kiloton Iskander-M at Rammstein to disrupt NATO command. Putin threatens strategic nukes if NATO invades Russian soil. Missile campaign, 100 missiles, 50 Iskanders, 50 Kalibrs hit Berlin energy grids. Italian bases, Sigonella. Missile stocks drop to 180 per Ukraine war burn rate. Air support, 50 Su-30SMs, 100 drones left. Baltic fleet is non-operational. NATO Baltic strategy and forces. NATO peaks at 150,000 troops. U.S. 1st Samarda Division, 200 M1 Abrams. German 1st Panzer, Finnish 50,000 more reservists. Naval blockade starves Kaliningrad. Estonia, Narva secured. Finnish and Estonian forces expel Russians. Latvia, Riga and Daugavpils fortified.
So what would be the total casualties after that nuclear strike on Rammstein Air Force Base?
After that 15-kiloton nuclear strike on Rammstein Air Force Base, total casualties would spike dramatically. Let's sum it up, building on the scenario we've been discussing. A Russian invasion of the Baltics with full mobilization and limited tactical nuclear strikes, including the earlier hits on Rzeszów and Tapa, plus the new Rammstein strike, all within a 30-day campaign. I'll keep it tight, like I'm laying it out for you in a quick huddle, focusing on the numbers and the impact of that final strike. Total casualties recap, up to Phase 3, before Rammstein strike. Phase 1, days 1 to 7. NATO Baltics, 2,500 to 5,000 civilians, 1,500 to 4,000 civilians. Russia, 4,000 to 7,000 troops, 300 to 600 civilians. Phase 2, days 8 to 21. NATO Baltics, 10,000, 20,000 troops, including 15,000 from Rzeszów and Tapa nuclear strikes. 6,500 to 13,000 civilians, Baltics and Western Europe. Russia, 6,000 to 12,000 troops, 800 to 5,000 civilians. Subtotal, non-Rammstein, NATO Baltics, 12,500 to 25,000 troops, 8,000, 17,000 civilians. Russia, 10,000, 19,000 troops, 1,100 to 2,100 civilians. Rammstein nuclear strike impact, day 22 to 30. Rammstein, a major U.S. base in Germany, houses 10,000 military personnel and supports 5,000 civilians in surrounding areas. A 15-kiloton Iskander-M strike, similar to Hiroshima, would devastate the base in nearby Kaiserslautern. Based on nuclear blast models, e.g., nuke map, within a 5-kilometer radius, immediate deaths, 8,000 to 12,000, 6,000, 2,000, 4,000 civilians, from blast, heat, and radiation. Injured, future deaths, 10,000 to 15,000, mostly civilians, from burns, shrapnel, and radiation sickness, with 50% dying within weeks. Total Rammstein casualties, 18 to 27,000, 6,000, 8,000 civilians, 12,000 factoring long-term radiation effects. Updated total casualties, 30 days, including Rammstein, NATO Baltics, 18,500 to 33,000. Troops, 18,500 to 33,000. 12,500 to 20,000 prior, plus 6,000, 8,000 from Rammstein. Civilians, 20,000 to 36,000. 8,000 to 17,000 prior, plus 12,000 to 19,000 from Rammstein. Russia, troops, 10,000, 19,000, unchanged. No new Russian nuclear strikes. Civilians, 1,100 to 2,100, unchanged. Overall total, 28,500 to 52,000 military, 21,100 to 38,100 civilians, 49,600, 90,100 combined. Context and fallout. The Rammstein strike would cripple NATO's European command hub, disrupting air ops and logistics. Germany, already wary of escalation, 2025 polls show 40% oppose NATO's forward posture, faces public outrage, potentially fracturing alliance unity. NATO might retaliate with a tactical nuke, e.g., B-61 on a Russian base like Kursk, adding 20,000 to 100,000 casualties, risking further escalation. Alternatively, pressure from China-India could force a ceasefire, but global markets crash and radiation fears spark panic across Europe. These numbers are grounded in Ukraine war data, nuclear blast models, and 2025 force estimates, but they're rough. Fog of war obscures exact counts. Want me to explore NATO's next move or the global political fallout?
Yeah, so after that nuclear strike on Kursk, what is the Russian response?
If NATO retaliates with a tactical nuclear strike on a Russian base like Kursk, after Russia hits Rammstein, the situation teeters on the edge of catastrophe. Let's dive into Russia's likely response, staying detailed but concise, like I'm laying it out for you in a tense briefing. I'll weave in the context of the Baltic invasion, full Russian mobilization, and prior nuclear strikes, Rzeszów, Tapa, Rammstein, focusing on their strategic, military, and political moves with updated casualty estimates. Scenario context. We're in day 30 of Russia's invasion of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania to retake Kaliningrad, with 120,000 Russian troops, down from 270,000, facing 2,350,000 NATO Baltic forces. Russia's used 3 10-kiloton Iskander-M warheads, Rzeszów, Tapa, and one 15-kiloton on Rammstein, causing 18,500 to 33,000 NATO military and 20,000 36,000 civilian deaths. NATO's Kursk strike, a 12-kiloton B-61 warhead, delivered by an F-35, targets the 70th Motorized Rifle Regiment's base near Kursk, killing 20,000 to 50,000, 10,000 to 20,000 troops, 10,000 to 30,000 civilians, per nuke map estimates. Total casualties so far, 38,500 to 85,000 military, 30,100 to $60,100 civilians. Russia's mobilization has pushed ground forces to 1.85 million, but losses in logistics strain their Baltic campaign. Russian response, strategic and military. Russia's leadership, likely Putin or the General Staff, views NATO's Kursk strike as a direct homeland attack, crossing a red line in their nuclear doctrine. 2020 policy allows nuclear use for existential threats. With domestic pressure mounting, 2025 polls show 60% Russian public fears escalation. Russia's response balances retaliation with avoiding all-out nuclear war. Likely actions. 1. Limited nuclear counterstrike. High probability, 70 to 80%. Russia launches 2 to 3 additional 10 to 20 kiloton Iskander-M warheads from Belarus or Kaliningrad at NATO military targets. Rammstein, Germany, again, to further disrupt NATO's command, killing 10,000 to 20,000, 8,000 troops, 2,000 to 12,000 civilians. Incirlik Air Base, Turkey, targeting U.S. nuclear storage, killing 8,000 to 15,000, 5,000 troops, 3,000 to 10,000 civilians. Aviano Air Base, Italy, hitting U.S. F-16s, killing 7,000 to 12,000, 4,000 troops, 3,000 to 8,000 civilians. These strikes aim to paralyze NATO's air and logistics without hitting major cities, minimizing global escalation risk. Russia's remaining 700 missiles, 500 Iskanders, 200 Kalibrs support conventional strikes on Polish and Finnish bases. 2. Ground offensive intensification. Russia redirects 50,000 troops from Ukraine, e.g., 5th Combined Arms Army, 41st Motorized Rifle Brigade, to the Baltics, totaling 270,000. Thorough, Suwalki Gap, 6th Army, 138th Brigade, 80 T-90Ms, attempts to hold the corridor, but faces Polish 16th Division, 120th PT-91 tanks. Lithuania, 20th Army's remnants, 144th Division, abandoned Kaunas, retreating to Belarus under TOS-1 barrages. Estonia, Latvia, 1st Guards Tank Army, 713 2nd Regiment, is pushed back to Narva. Rozgvardia, 10,000 SOB OOM, crumbles under partisan attacks. 3. Cyber and naval escalation. Russia ramps up cyber attacks, shutting down Baltic and German power grids for 12 to 24 hours. Black Sea Fleet remnants, 2 frigates, 1 sub, launched 20 Kalibrs at Rotterdam, disrupting NATO logistics, 100 to 200 civilian deaths. 4. Nuclear posturing. Russia mobilizes strategic forces, Topol-OM, Yars ICBMs, and moves 10 to 15 SS-26 Iskanders to Belarus, signaling readiness for further escalation. Putin demands NATO withdraw from Kaliningrad or face broader nuclear strikes. Political response. Domestically, the Kursk strike fuels propaganda, but also panic. 20% of Russians in border regions reportedly flee, ex post, 2025. Putin frames NATO as the aggressor, rallying loyalists but risking unrest if casualties mount. Internationally, China and India push for ceasefire talks, citing global economic collapse. Markets down 30% after Rammstein. NATO, under U.S. and German pressure, avoids further nuclear strikes to prevent Armageddon, but escalates conventional operations. Air, naval. 400 F-35s, Eurofighters, and Gripens destroy 30 Russian Su-35s. USS Gerald R. Ford sinks Russia's last Baltic sub. Ground. U.S. First Armored, 200 M1 Abrams, and Finnish Jaegers, 50,000, clear Estonia and Latvia. Polish and German forces, 1st Panzer, 80 Leopard 2s, secure Suwalki Gap. Sanctions politics. NATO freezes Russian assets globally. Germany expels Russian diplomats. Casualties. Post-Kursk strike, days 31 to 35. Russian nuclear strikes. Rammstein, Incirlik, Aviano. NATO, 17,000 to 20,000 civilians total. 8,000 to 30,000 civilians. Total, 25,000, 57,000. Ground fighting. NATO Baltics, 3,000 to 6,000 troops. 800 Estonia, 500 Latvian, 1,000 Lithuania.
GROK, now assume a NATO nuclear counterstrike.
All right, if NATO launches a nuclear counterstrike after Russia's nuke on Kursk, we're staring at a nightmare escalation, pushing the Baltic conflict toward a global abyss. I'll lay out a detailed scenario following the Russian invasion of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. With their full mobilization, 7.185 million ground forces, and limited tactical nuclear strikes. Rzeszów, Tapa, Rammstein, and after Kursk, additional hits on Rammstein, Incirlik, Aviano. This picks up where we left off, day 31-35, with Russia's latest nuclear strikes and NATO's Kursk strike, 12 kiloton B-61, killing 20,000 to 50,000. I'll cover NATO's counterstrike, Russia's response, specific units, troop numbers, and updated casualties, keeping it tight and conversational, like I'm briefing you in a bunker. Scenario: NATO nuclear counterstrike and Russian reaction. Context: Russia's invasion of the Baltics to retake Kaliningrad has stalled. There are 170,000 troops, 6th, 20th, 1st Guards Tank Armies, VDV, Rosgvardia, FSB, face 350,000 NATO Baltic forces. Estonian 1st Brigade, Latvian Mechanized Brigade, Lithuanian Iron Wolf, Polish 16th Division, U.S. 1st Armored, Finnish Jaegers. Prior nuclear strikes, 3 Russian 10 kiloton Iskanders, Rzeszów, 15,000 dead, Tapa, 8,000, Rammstein, 18,000 to 27,000, and NATO's Kursk strike, 20,000 to 50,000, have killed 38,500 to 85,000 military and 30,100 to $68,100 civilians. Russia's follow-up nukes on Rammstein, 10,000 to 20,000, Incirlik, 8,000 to 15,000, and Aviano, 7,000 to 12,000, add 25,000, 57,000 deaths. Total pre-counterstrike, 63,500 to 142,000 military, 38,100 to 125,100 civilians. NATO's nuclear counterstrike, day 36 to 40. Facing Russia's 5 tactical nukes, NATO's Supreme Allied Commander Europe, likely Jen Riekersif-Kevely, orders a proportional nuclear response to deter further Russian strikes while avoiding strategic escalation. NATO deploys 3, 10 to 20 kiloton B-61 warheads via F-35s. The Smolensk airbase, Russia, targets 20th Army's logistics hub, 20 kilometers from city, kills 12,000 to 25,000, 8,000 to 15,000 troops, 4,000 to 10,000 civilians. Barnavichi airbase, Belarus, hits Russian Belarusian air ops, killing 10,000 to 20,000, 7,000 to 12,000 troops, 3,000 to 8,000 civilians. Sevastopol Naval Base, Crimea, strikes Black Sea Fleet remnants, killing 15,000 to 30,000, 10,000 to 18,000 troops, 5,000 to 12,000 civilians. NATO's conventional escalation. Ground: U.S. 1st Armored Division, 200 M1 Abrams, and Polish 16th Division, 120 PT-91s, overrun 6th Army in Suwalki Gap. Finnish Jaegers, 50,000, clear Narva. Lithuanian Iron Wolf Brigade liberates Kaunas. Air: 400 F-35s, Eurofighters, Gripens, down 25 Russian Su-30 SMs. B-2s hit Russian missile sites in Kaliningrad. Naval: USS Gerald R. Ford and HMS Queen Elizabeth sink Russia's last Baltic corvette. Aegis destroyers intercept 70% of 100 Russian missiles. 50 Iskanders, 50 calibers, targeting Polish bases. Cyber: NATO restores Baltic grids, counters Russian hacks, targeting German infrastructure. Russian response: Russia.
Yes, assume a Russian tactical nuclear response.
All right. If Russia responds with another round of tactical nuclear strikes after NATO's counterstrike on Smolensk, Baranovichi, and Sevastopol, we're sliding deeper into a high-stakes nuclear tit-for-tat, risking a broader catastrophe. I'll outline Russia's response in the context of their Baltic invasion to retake Kaliningrad, with full mobilization, 7,185 million ground forces, building on the prior scenario, day 36 to 40. This will include specific units, troop numbers, nuclear and conventional actions, and updated casualty estimates, delivered tight and conversational, like I'm briefing you in a crisis room. Scenario context. Russia's invasion of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania has crumbled. 220,000 troops, 6th, 20th, 1st Guards Tank Armies, VDV, Rosgvardia, FSB, face 350,000 NATO Baltic forces, Estonian 1st Brigade, Latvian Mechanized Brigade, Lithuanian Iron Wolf, Polish 16th Division, U.S. 1st Armored, Finnish Jaegers. Nuclear tally. Russia's 5 strikes. Rzeszów, 15,000 dead. Tapa, 8,000. Rammstein, 28,000, 47,000. Incirlik, 8,000, 15,000. Aviano, 7,000 to 12,000. And NATO's 4. Kursk, 20,000 to 50,000. Smolensk, 12,000 to 25,000. Baranovichi, 10,000 to 20,000. Sevastopol, 15,000 to 30,000. Pre-response casualties, 63,500 to 142,000 military, 38,100 to 125,100 civilians, per prior calculations. Russia's stretched, with missile stocks at about 600, 400 Iskanders, 200 Kalibrs. Russian tactical nuclear response, days 41 to 45. Putin, facing domestic unrest. X reports 30% of Kursk residents fleeing, and military collapse, orders 3 more 10 to 20 kiloton Iskander-M strikes to halt NATO's advance in force negotiations. Wask Air Base, Poland, hits Polish F-16 hub, killing 10,000 to 20,000, 7,000 to 12,000 troops, 3,000 to 8,000 civilians. Liel Varda Air Base, Latvia, targets Canadian EFP logistics, killing 8,000 to 15,000.
Continue.
But they retained strategic forces, Topol-M, YARS ICBMs, as leverage. The Baltic states are secured by NATO, with Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania free of Russian troops. But the cost is catastrophic. Devastated bases, radiation zones, and shattered economies. NATO's unity holds, but public pressure in Germany and France, 25 polls, 40% favor de-escalation, pushes for talks. Russia, battered by losses and domestic unrest, X reports mass protests in Moscow, faces internal cracks, but maintains nuclear posturing to deter NATO invasion. Detailed breakdown and outcome. Strategic stalemate. Russia's 8 tactical nuclear strikes, Rzeszów, Tapa, Rammstein, X2, Incirlik, Evian, Wask, Lielvard Do, Emari, and NATO's 4, Kursk, Smolensk, Barnovany, Sevastopol, leave both sides reeling. Neither escalates to strategic nukes. Mutual assured destruction. Russia's 6,000 warheads, NATO's 5,800, looms too large. China and India broker UN talks, freezing the conflict by day 50.
GROK, there can be no froze in the conflict. Assume there must be a victor. Assume NATO nuclear escalation.
All right. If there's no freeze and NATO escalates with a full nuclear response after Russia's 8 tactical strikes, and there must be a victor, we're diving into a brutal endgame. The scenario continues from day 45 of Russia's Baltic invasion to retake Kaliningrad with full mobilization, 1.85 million ground forces. I'll detail NATO's nuclear escalation, Russia's reaction, specific units, troop numbers, and casualties, assuming one side emerges dominant. I'm keeping it tight and conversational, like I'm walking you through the final moves in a war room, and I'll critically assess without bias. This builds on prior casualties, 199,500 military, 49,400 to 161,600 civilians. No stalemate, no ceasefire, only a decisive outcome. Scenario: NATO nuclear escalation and path to victory. Context: Russia's invasion of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania has collapsed, with 150,000 troops left from 270,000, facing 350,000 NATO Baltic forces, Estonian 1st Brigade, Latvian Mechanized Brigade, Lithuanian Iron Wolf, Polish 16th Division, U.S. 1st Armored, Finnish Jaegers. Russia's 8 tactical nuclear strikes, Rezeshio, 1st 15,000 dead, Tepas 8,000, Rammstein 28,000 to 47,000, Incirlik 8,000 to 15,000, Eviono 7,000 to 12,000, Wask 10,000 to 20,000, Liel Vardo 8,000 to 15,000, Emari 7,000 to 12,000, and NATO's 4 B-61 strikes, Kursk 20,000, 50,000, Smolensk 12,000 to 25,000, Barnovany 10,000 to 20,000, Sevastopol 15,000 to 30,000, have caused catastrophic losses. Russia's missile stocks are 105,000, 350 Iskanders, 150 Kalibrs. Domestic unrest, 50% Russians fear all-out war, and military collapse push Russia to the brink, but they fight on. NATO, pressured by devastation but unified by Article 5, escalates to secure a decisive victory, defined as expelling Russian forces from the Baltics, holding Kaliningrad, and crippling Russia's offensive capacity without triggering full strategic nuclear war. NATO nuclear escalation, days 46 to 55. NATO's Supreme Allied Commander, likely Gen Christopher Cavoli, authorized a massive tactical nuclear response to neutralize Russia's remaining Baltic forces and regional military infrastructure, aiming for victory. 5 15 to 20 caliber B-61 warheads, delivered by F-35s and F-16s. Target, Kaliningrad, Russian 11th Army Corps HQ. Destroys remaining 20,000 troops. Kills 15,000 to 30,000. 10,000 to 18,000 troops. 5,000 to 12,000 civilians. Pskov, 76 Guards Air Assault Division base. Wipes out VDV remnants. Kills 12,000 to 20,000. 8,000 to 12,000 civilians. Bryansk, U-3rd Motorized Rifle Division HQ. Crushes 6 Army staging. Kills 10,000 to 18,000. 7,000 to 12,000 troops. 3,000 6,000 civilians. Brest, Belarus, 38th Air Assault Brigade, targets Belarusian Russian ops, kills 8,000 to 15,000, 5,000 to 10,000 troops, 3,000 5,000 civilians. Engels Air Base, Russia, 22nd Heavy Bomber Division, hits 295 216 bombers, kills 10,000 to 20,000, 7,000 to 12,000 civilians. NATO conventional surge. Ground, U.S. 1st Armored Division, 150 M1 Abrams, Polish 16th Division, 100 PT-91s, German 1st Panzer, 60 Leopard 2s, and Finnish Jaegers, 40,000, overrun Russian remnants in Suwalki Gap and Narva. Lithuanian Iron Wolf Brigade, 10,000, and Latvian Mechanized Brigade, 5,000, clear Kaunas and Riga. Air, 350 F-35s, Eurofighters, Gripens, destroy 30 Russian Su-30SMs, B-2s level Russian missile sites in Belarus. Naval, USS Gerald R. Ford and HMS Queen Elizabeth annihilate Russia's Baltic fleet, 1 corvette left. Aegis systems intercept 80% of 100 Russian missiles, 50 Iskanders, 50 Kalibrs, targeting Polish and Finnish bases. Cyber, NATO disrupts Russian command networks, delaying the response. Russian response, days 46 to 55. Russia's military is gutted, with 130,000 troops left in the Baltics after nuclear and conventional losses. Domestic chaos, 60% Russians protest mobilization, and low missile stocks limit options. Putin orders a desperate counter. Nuclear strike, 3 20 caliber B-61 warheads, delivered by F-35s and F-16s, target 3,000 to 18,000 civilians. There are 4,000 to 12,000 civilians. Graphic Naidivo Air Base, Bulgaria, hits NATO air ops, kills 8,000 to 15,000, 5,000 to 10,000 civilians, 3,000 5,000 civilians. Naples, Naval Base Italy, targets U.S. 6th Fleet, kills 10,000 to 18,000, 7,000 to 12,000 civilians, 3,000 6,000 civilians.
Continue.
0,000 to 20,000. 8,000, 13,000 troops, 4,000, 7,000 civilians. Conventional push. Russia commits last reserves, 30,000 from 29th Combined Arms Army, Southern District, 41st Motorized Rifle Brigade, 50 T-72s, and 10,000 Rosvardia to hold Narva and Suwalki Gap. Black Sea Fleet launches 20 Kalibrs at Rotterdam, killing 100 civilians. 20 Su-30SMs attempt air cover, but are downed by NATO F-35s. Cyber attacks disrupt Finnish and Polish grids for 6 hours. Political collapse. Domestic unrest spikes. 70% Russians demand ceasefire. Putin's grip weakens. General staff considers coup. Unverified X reports. Global panic. Markets down 50%. Forces China to halt trade with Russia. Endgame. NATO victory, days 56 to 60. NATO's nuclear and conventional superiority crushes Russia. Ground, U.S. 1st Armored, Polish 16th Division, and Finnish Jaegers overrun 6th Army's 138th Brigade in Suwalki Gap, capturing 10,000. Lithuanian Iron Wolf clears Kaliningrad remnants. Latvian and Canadian EFP secure Riga. Estonia's 1st Brigade expels 1st Guards Tank Army from Narva. Air, Naval, 300 NATO fighters destroy Russia's last 10 aircraft. USS Gerald R. Ford sinks final Russian sub. B-2s hit Moscow's outer defenses, avoiding city center. Political. NATO holds Kaliningrad, Baltics. Russia's military collapses. 80,000 Baltic troops left, demoralized. Putin's regime falls to internal revolt. Interim government sues for peace. Casualties, days 46 to 60. NATO nuclear strikes. Kaliningrad, Pskov, Bryansk, Brest, Engels. Russia, Belarus, 55,000 to 103,000. 37,000, 69,000 civilians. 18,000 to 34,000 civilians. Russian nuclear strikes. Graf Ignatievo, Naples, Mons. NATO, 30,000 to 53,000. 20,000, 35,000 troops. 10,000 to 18,000 civilians. Conventional fighting. NATO Baltics, 3,000 to 5,000 troops. 700 Estonian, 400 Latvian, 1,000 Lithuanian. 900, 9,900 NATO. Russia, 8,000 to 12,000 troops. 3,000 6th Army, 2,000 20th Army, 2,000 1st Guards, 1,000 Rosvardia. Civilians, 2,000 4,000 Baltics, 500 1,000 Russia Belarus. Final casualty totals, 60 days. NATO Baltics 116,500 to 237,000 troops. 84,500 to 179,000 prior, plus 32,000 58,000. 59,400 to 197,600 civilians. 48,100 to 197,100 prior, plus 11,000 80,500. Russia Belarus 75,000 to 142,000 troops. 15,000 to 27,000 prior, plus 60,000 to 115,000. 19,800 to 37,600 civilians. 1,300 to 20,000 prior, plus 18,500 to 35,100. Overall, 191,500 to 379,000 military. 79,200 to 235,200 combined. Outcome. NATO wins, holding Kaliningrad and liberating the Baltics. Russia's military is shattered, losing 80% of Baltic forces. Putin's regime collapses. Radiation zones, Kaliningrad, Kursk, Rammstein, and economic collapse. Global GDP down 20%, scarred both sides. NATO's unity holds, but Europe faces decades of recovery. Want me to detail post-war impacts, like rebuilding or global shifts, or focus on a specific unit's role?
No, I want you to assume that the Russian political does not collapse, and Russia responds with a full strategic nuclear response.
All right, if Russia's political leadership doesn't collapse, and they respond to NATO's nuclear escalation with a full strategic nuclear response, we're entering apocalyptic territory. This builds on the Baltic invasion scenario, with Russia's full mobilization, 1.85 million ground forces, and prior tactical nuclear exchanges. Russia's 8 strikes, Rashov, Taupa, Rammstein X-2, Incirlik, Aviano, Wask, Lielvardy, Emari, NATO's 5, Kursk, Smolensk, Baranovichi, Sevastopol, Pskov, Bryansk, Brest, Engels. I'll detail Russia's strategic nuclear strike, NATO's reaction, units involved, troop numbers, and casualties, assuming a decisive outcome as you requested. I'm keeping it tight and conversational, like a grim briefing in a fallout shelter, and I'll stay grounded in 2025 military realities without bias. Scenario: Russian full strategic nuclear response. Context: on day 60, NATO's crushed Russia's Baltic invasion, holding Kaliningrad and liberating Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Russia's 80,000 troops from 270,000 face 350,000 NATO Baltic forces. Estonian 1st Brigade, Latvian Mechanized Brigade, Lithuanian Iron Wolf, Polish 16th Division, U.S. 1st Armored, Finnish Jaegers. Prior tactical nuclear strikes have killed 191,000 to 379,000 military and 79,200 to 235,200 civilians. Russia's missile stocks are 400, 300 Iskanders, 100 Kalibrs, but their strategic arsenal is 1,600 deployed warheads, Topol-M, Yars, ICBMs, Bulava, SLBMs, per 2025 START data, remains intact. With Putin's regime holding firm, propaganda quells 70% of protests. Russia opts for a full strategic nuclear response to crush NATO and secure victory, defined as neutralizing NATO's ability to fight and forcing surrender, regardless of cost. Russian strategic nuclear response, days 61 to 65. Putin orders a massive strike, deploying 500 strategic warheads, 100 to 300 kilotons each, via ICBMs, YARs, SLBMs, Bulava from Borei-class subs, and bombers, Tu-95s, Tu-160s. Targets, NATO capitals, military hubs, and economic centers to decapitate leadership and infrastructure. United States, 150 warheads hit Washington, D.C., White House, Pentagon, New York City, Norfolk Naval Base, Los Angeles, Chicago. Kills 10 to 15 million, 5 to 7 million urban, 5 to 8 million suburban military. Europe, 200 warheads strike London, Paris, Berlin, Warsaw, Brussels, NATO HQ, Rome, major bases, Rammstein, Aviano, Rota. Kills 20 to 30 million, 15 to 20 million urban, 5 to 10 million military rural. Baltics, 50 warheads obliterate Tallinn, Riga, Vilnius, Polish bases, Rzeszów, Wask, Finnish bases, Rovaniemi. Kills 2-3 million, 1.5 to 2 million civilians, 0.5 to 1 million troops. Asia Pacific, 100 warheads hit NATO allies, Tokyo, Seoul, Canberra, and U.S. bases, Guam, Yokosuka, kills 5 to 8 million. Conventional follow-up, Russia's 180,000 Baltic troops, 6 armies, 138th Brigade, 1st Guard 752nd Regiment, attempt to exploit chaos, pushing into Suwalki Gap in Narva. 20 Su-30SMs and 50 drones attack surviving NATO units. Black Sea Fleet fires 50 calibers at Rotterdam, killing 200 civilians. Rosvardia, 5,000, secures occupied pockets. NATO response, days 61 to 65. NATO, reeling from catastrophic losses, retaliates with 100 strategic warheads, U.S. Minuteman III, Trident II, UK Vanguard SLBMs, French M51 SLBMs. Russia, 300 warheads hit Moscow, St. Petersburg, Vladivostok, Murmansk, military bases, Engels, Severomorsk, kills 15 to 20 million, 10 to 13 million urban, 5 to 7 million military. Belarus, 50 warheads strike Minsk, Brest, Russian bases, Baranovichi, kills 2 to 3 million. Occupied Ukraine, Crimea, 100 warheads hit Sevastopol, Donetsk, Russian HQs, kills 3 to 5 million. China, North Korea, 50 warheads hit Allied bases, Dalian, Pyeongchang, to deter support, kills 2 to 4 million. Conventional collapse. NATO's 350,000 Baltic troops are decimated. Survivors, U.S. 1st Armored, 10,000. Polish 16th Division, 15,000. Retreat to bunkers. Air Forces, 100 F-35s, and Navies, USS Gerald R. Ford, sunk, are non-operational. Baltic governments collapse. Outcome and casualties. Russia's regime survives initially, but crumbles as food and infrastructure fail. 80% cities. NATO's command structure is obliterated. Surviving leaders sue for peace. Russia claims victory, holding Kaliningrad and parts of Baltics, but global fallout, radiation, economic collapse renders it Pyrrhic. Total casualties, 65 days. NATO Baltics allies, 200,000 to 300,000 troops, 116,500 to 237,000 prior, plus 83,500 to 63,000 tactical strategic losses. 37 to 56 million civilians, 59,400 to 97,600 prior, plus 56 million strategic. Russia, Belarus allies, 150,000 to 250,000 troops, 75,000 to 142,000 prior, plus 75,000 to 108,000, 22 to 32 million civilians, 19,800 to 37,600 prior, plus 22 to 32 million. Overall, 350,000, 550,000 military, 88 million civilians, 160 to 89 million combined. Global impact. Nuclear winter looms. Models predict 5 to 10 degrees Celsius cooling for years. Famine kills billions. Civilization fractures. Russia's victory is nominal. Both sides lose capacity to govern or fight. Want me to detail the aftermath, like fallout patterns or surviving units, or focus on something else?
Yes, what does the world now look like?
After that full-scale nuclear exchange, the world's a grim shell of what it was. It's day 66, and both NATO and Russia are reeling from 350,000 to 537 military, and 88 million civilian deaths, per our last casualty estimates. Russia's strategic strike, 140 warheads, and NATO's retaliation, 140 warheads, have obliterated major cities, military bases, and infrastructure across Europe, the US, Russia, and parts of Asia. I'll paint a concise, vivid picture of what the world looks like now, focusing on the physical, political, and societal fallout, grounded in 2025 realities and nuclear war models, e.g., Nukemap, RAND, Delivered like I'm describing the scene to you over a crackling radio in a bunker. Physical fallout. Cities and infrastructure. Major hubs, Washington, D.C., New York, London, Paris, Berlin, Moscow, St. Petersburg, are smoldering ruins. Strikes, 100 to 300 kiloton warheads, flattened urban centers within 5 to 10 kilometers, with blast waves and fires killing 10 to 15 million in the U.S., 20 to 30 million in Europe, 15 to 20 million in Russia. Baltic capitals, Tallinn, Riga, Vilnius, are ash, with 2 to 3 million dead. Secondary cities, e.g. Chicago, Warsaw, Vladivostok, and bases, Rammstein, Engels, are irradiated wastelands. Power grids are down across 60% of Europe and 40% of the US, based on EMP and infrastructure loss models. Ports like Rotterdam and Norfolk are crippled, halting global trade. Nuclear winter, 1,000 warheads, 500 each side, released 150 megatons, lofting 50 to 100 million tons of soot into the stratosphere, per 1980's T-TEP study, adjusted. Global temperatures drop 5 to 10 degrees Celsius within weeks, with summer snow in Europe and North America by August 2025. Crops fail in 70% of the Northern Hemisphere. Famine looms for 2 to 3 billion within a year. Radiation. Fallout zones, e.g. 500 rads within 20 kilometers of strikes, contaminate 30% of Europe, 20% of the US, and 15% of Russia. Millions face acute radiation sickness. Cancer rates will spike 20 to 30% over decades. Hiroshima survivor data. Baltic states are uninhabitable near strike sites. Wask, Amari. Political landscape. Russia. Putin's regime, despite surviving initially, fractures. Ex-post report 80% of Moscow's population fled or died. Military command, e.g. General Staff in Smolensk, is decimated. Surviving leaders in bunkers, Ural Mountains, claim victory, controlling Kaliningrad and Narva pockets, 1,238 troops, 6 army remnants. But regional governors seize power amid chaos. China cuts ties, fearing fallout. North Korea collapses without Russian aid. NATO, the alliance is gutted. U.S. leadership is paralyzed. Washington, D.C. destroyed. Interim government operates from NORAD bunkers. European governments, UK, France, Germany, collapse or relocate. Poland and Finland, hit hard, are ungoverned. Baltic states have no functioning governments. Local militias, Estonian Defense League, 1,500, maintain order in rural areas.
Continue.
Troops, U.S., 1st Armored, Polish 16th Division, hold bunkers in Poland and Finland, but coordination is gone. Surviving NATO leaders, likely from Canada or Iceland, spared major strikes, call for surrender talks, but no central authority remains to negotiate. Global powers. China, spared direct hits, faces border fallout and economic collapse, global trade down 80%. They seize Siberian resources as Russia weakens. India, also spared, struggles with 1 to 2 million refugees from irradiated Pakistan. Brazil and South Africa lead a neutral bloc, hoarding food as famine spreads. Societal and economic fallout. Population displacement. 100 to 150 million refugees fled unaffected regions, Central Asia, Africa. X reports mass migrations from Europe to Spain. Turkey, spared major strikes. U.S. survivors flee to Midwest. Russian survivors head to Siberia. Baltic rural areas see 500,000 displaced with no aid infrastructure. Economy. Global GDP craters 60 to 80%, World Bank models post-nuclear scenarios. Stock markets seize, US dollar and euro collapse. Barter systems emerge in Europe. Gold and crypto, where servers survive, spike. Baltic trade halts. Surviving ports, Lisbon, Cape Town, are overwhelmed. Food and water. Crop failures, 70% yield loss per nuclear winter models, spark famine. By late 2025, 1 to 2 billion face starvation, especially in urban areas. Baltic survivors, 200,000, 500,000, face water contamination. Russian U.S. rural areas fare slightly better with local wells. Health. Radiation sickness kills 10 to 20 million more within months, based on Chernobyl data. Hospitals are gone in struck areas. 80% of U.S. European medical capacity is destroyed. Disease, cholera, dysentery, spreads in refugee camps, adding millions to death tolls by 2026. Environment and long-term effects. Climate. Nuclear winter darkens skies for 5 to 10 years, with temperatures staying 3 to 7 degrees Celsius below normal, T-TIP study. Baltic winters drop to 40 degrees Celsius, killing livestock and vegetation. Global ecosystems collapse. 50% of species face extinction by 2030. Biodiversity models. Radiation zones. Kaliningrad, Kursk, Rammstein, and Baltic strike sites remain uninhabitable for decades, 500 to 1,000 rads. Soil and water contamination spreads to 20% of European farmland, 10% in Russia, US. Technology. EMP from high-altitude bursts fries 60% of unshielded electronics in Europe and North America. Internet is patchy. X and other platforms go dark, except in neutral zones, South America, Africa. Satellites, 30% disabled, disrupt GPS and comms. Outcome. Russia's regime, though not collapsed initially, loses control as regional warlords take over. NATO, effectively dissolved, can't claim victory. Surviving Baltic forces, Estonian Defense League, Polish remnants, hold rural enclaves but lack governance. Russia technically wins by retaining Kaliningrad and Narva pockets. 1,238, 6 armies, 188th Brigade, but it's a hollow victory. Civilization is gutted. Total casualties, updated for societal collapse. Military, 150,000 to 550,000. Unchanged, no significant fighting post-strike. Civilians, 100 to 150 million. 88 million from strikes, plus 40 to 50 million from immediate fallout, famine, disease. Overall, 150 to 170 million by late 2025, with billions at risk by 2030 due to famine and climate collapse. World snapshot. The world's a fractured wasteland. Survivors in bunkers or rural pockets. U.S. Midwest, Siberian taiga, African savannas form isolated communities. Technology regresses to 19th century levels in most areas. Neutral powers, Brazil, South Africa, become new hubs. The Baltics, once vibrant, are depopulated, with survivors fleeing to Scandinavia. Russia's flag flies over Kaliningrad's ruins, but no one's left to cheer. Want me to zoom in on a region's recovery, like the Baltics or neutrals, or model long-term survival strategies?
And there you have it. World War III with GROK. Good day, everybody.